As she said, I'm Laura Jeffords-Greenberg, and I'm Senior Legal Counsel, and this is my colleague, Dave Hunt, who is a technical artist. We both are based out of Copenhagen, working for Unity Technologies. I'll be doing the first half of the presentation, and then I'll hand it off to Dave.
Thanks, Laura.
And clicker. All right, so as was mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about storytelling in XR. We are going to talk a little bit about audience engagement and then really focus the majority of the talk on production tools for XR that can be used to create in 3D or create in 2D. There we go. So one of the first questions I'm sure that you may have is, why is a lawyer talking to me about XR and not addressing legal issues? One of my colleagues asked me the same thing when I mentioned that I was giving this presentation. He said, "What do you know about XR?" It's really a two-pronged answer. First, before Unity Technologies, I was at Little Star, which is a New York AR, VR startup, and there I was doing legal affairs and business affairs. And at Unity, I am legal counsel for the research and development department. So I have to memorialize all new and upcoming technology, much of which has not even been conceived yet, in agreements, and make sure that I protect the company. So I spent a lot of my time working with engineers and working with technical artists like Dave to understand what they do and to understand how the technology functions. So that's why I'm here to talk to you about XR. And we just want to start. I know that we have people who are very advanced in VR and some people who might be coming from the film industry who are not entirely certain maybe about what exactly XR is. So XR is an umbrella term which covers AR, VR, and MR. And to go a little bit deeper, in case people are not clear what all of those are, VR obviously stands for virtual reality, which is when you are fully immersed in an experience. And usually that's when you are wearing a headset. And that could actually be a fully digital world, or it could be a 360 video of the real world. Augmented reality is AR, and in that, a digital content is placed over the real world using the help of a phone or a tablet. Mixed reality is where you're doing a very similar thing of layering digital content over the real world with the help of a tablet or a phone or the HoloLens, some glasses, and the digital world is actually interacting with the real world. This is used a lot in industries like healthcare, construction, to do training. So that's the primary purpose of MR at this point. And just to touch on also what is Unity Technologies. Unity is the world's most widely used real-time 3D development platform. It provides content creators around the world with the tools they need to build interactive 2D, 3D, VR, and AR experiences. So our CEO once said, "We believe the world is a better place with creators in it." And that really is an ethos that drives most of us at Unity. So that's why Dave and I, our day-to-day jobs aren't to market the company or to drive sales or anything like that, but we're actually very passionate about XR, and our company allows us to come to conferences like this to present, to speak, so that we can convey our passion and that we can actually help creators and bring more creators into the world. So Unity is primarily used for gaming. I think that's what most people know what it is used for. It's also being used a lot for film, and we're developing pipelines specifically for the film industry. It's also being used for virtual reality, for automotive and architecture and engineering. So I wanted to touch a little bit about audience engagement in XR. As we saw before, I think with all of the presentations, there is a unique element in virtual reality and also in augmented reality, where the audience interacts with the content in a way that is very different than traditional 2D or flat media. So what makes XR different? This is one of my favorite stock photos because it's a little ridiculous. To have someone wearing a VR headset and riding a bike seems a little dangerous to me. But it actually is a really great metaphor for the difference between traditional content and VR, XR content. When you're watching traditional content, you're sitting in the audience and you're looking at an environment and you're watching something happen to a character. Where in VR and also AR to a certain extent, you actually are the person riding the bike. You are in the environment and you are exerting a certain amount of control. So that's why I like to bring this up and point out really the differences between traditional media and XR. What I think is interesting and what maybe some of the other speakers haven't touched on is what is it that makes XR different? And that's something that a lot of scientists are working on trying to figure out right now. There have been lots of different scientific studies about the power of especially virtual reality. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with the studies that relate to pain management. They found that with burn victims, when they were changing their bandages and they were placed in some sort of VR experience, the patients actually had better responses to the pain than they did with opioids. So that's a pretty powerful statement. If VR can be more powerful than opioids. I'm sure you're also familiar that they are virtual reality is also being used to treat PTSD. It's being used to treat stroke victims, and also we're exploring how it affects empathy. So now I'll jump quickly to AR production and how Unity can maybe help you whether you are a producer of 2D content or 3D content. So some of you who may have watched Unite Berlin this year may have heard about Project Mars, which stands for Mixed and Augmented Reality Studio. So this is a new project that is coming out. And so Dave and I actually have tried out the alpha version together. So the premise behind Mars is that it'll allow you to develop, really just take any asset. So we got the Brandenburg Bear asset and we dropped it into the Mars platform, and then we're able to export it, we were able to build it, make sure I use my technical terms correctly, to a device, and then we took the bear around Copenhagen and took some pictures. Now, what makes Mars different is that you can build it both to AR Core and AR Kit, and it's really also that you can, here I'll flip, it's probably easier. So this is a video that really can show the potential. So we just showed, here's the very simple version that we used, and then I'll show you the potential which was shown at Unite Berlin. If the video will go. So as you can see, this is all through an augmented reality device. This is through a phone. And it was all built in Project Mars. So the other unique feature about Project Mars is that once you drop your asset, which again, it could be a 2D or 3D asset, anything that you have previously created for your company or your production or whatever experiences that you may have, you can then set the parameters over in the Mars panel and then test it out. So you can either use our pre-built living room, or you can build your own environment, and then you can say, I only want the bear to pop up on, let's say, the couch or a table, and you can actually set all the parameters and also set which way it faces. So that's something that Dave and I have yet to master. We're working on that part, but it really was, as someone who has no development skills, it was really quite easy just to take the asset, drop it in, and then test it out. So this is us. We took the bear around Copenhagen, and took some pictures. And you can actually see that in Project Mars, it's putting mesh over objects, so then it can figure out the planes on which you can place your asset. And now I'm going to pass it over to Dave, who's going to talk to you about VR production tools.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, I'm Dave Hunt. I'm a technical artist at Unity, and I'm here to talk about how XR content creation tools in Unity can really improve the efficiency of the storytelling productions that you might be making. So I come from a background of working in video game productions for about the last 17 years before joining Unity, and most recently worked at Bungie for about the last 12 years. We made the games including the Halo and Destiny series. So one thing I know for sure is it can be very expensive and time-consuming to produce this content for 3D animated stories. And as a technical artist, my job is to strive to make the process easier and more direct for artists. Ideally, we want animated storytelling to be accessible to everyone. There we go. So in addition to working in the games industry, for about the past 10 years, I've been teaching animation at the University of Washington. I work with the Animation Capstone program, where we teach animated film production. And just this last year, we introduced the new UW Reality Lab for teaching XR production. And for the first time, we did both, created offline rendered film and real-time VR film, based on the same story called The Tyrant. Let's see how this works. So VR is so new that PowerPoint doesn't quite support 360 video, but you can probably still tell what's going on there. So doing both a rendered film and a VR production was a very educational process, both for the students and the teachers alike. What we discovered is that there are some similarities between how the content is made for these types of productions, and there's also a lot of differences. There's the obvious things like you can't cut the camera in VR, the viewer can move their head, and if it's a room scale, they can move around. They'll be standing at different heights if it's in room scale. But there were some more differences we discovered that were somewhat surprised, because we had our own pipelines built for film production where we would be taking the animations and producing for film rendering that really didn't work well for VR. And one of them is where, for the character animation, we'll often custom pose the character exactly right for each shot, which means that between the shots, there'll be a little bit of a pop. So in VR, you can imagine what that looks like. They're teleporting around. It really wouldn't work very well. So some of these things came as a bit of a surprise. And the second one was we decided to switch platforms a couple times during production, starting with Vive, moving to the Oculus Rift, and finally, because we want all the students to be able to use this themselves, we ended up going with Google Cardboard. So this is a very important factor to think of when you're designing your story, is the constraints of the hardware platforms. For example, the Google Cardboard is not 6'd off, so that does not track position. That's significant in terms of storytelling if you're imagining that the viewer can see different vantage points. So you can learn from our mistakes, take some of these things into account, and hopefully help your productions. And for flat screen media, like offline rendered films, this is the general content creation process. There may be more to it depending on your production, but in general, the artist will work in tools outside of the engine called digital content creation tools. So this is like Maya or Blender, one of the many programs used to create content. And then typically they'll export the content to the engine, or if they're rendering the film, they'll send it to the renderer before they can really see what it's looking like. So this is a two-step process that causes a lot of inefficiencies because you can't directly see what the final output looks like. And when I was working as a technical artist in the games industry, this is a lot where I would apply my work, writing Python scripts to build tools for faster creation or to export it to the engine in the format that it needs. So there's a lot of wasted work here, I like to think. And if you add VR, if you're making a VR production, it adds yet another step. And for those who have been creating VR, I'm sure you are well aware how tiring it can get to put the headset on every time you want to take a look. So it actually really reduces the amount of iterations you can make. So we looked for a better process and thought, wouldn't it be better if we could create the content directly within the final output medium? So at Unity, we have a tool that the Unity Labs has built for this. It's called EditorXR. And this enables users to operate the Unity editor from within the VR headset and controllers. And I got to try this myself, and it is definitely faster and more efficient to work with. One of the things that's often real hard to get right is scale. Because if you're working outside of the program in like Maya, I'm a level artist, I'm making my scene, I export it, put on the headset, look at it, oh, it's not quite right. You need to repeat that step many times, and it's surprisingly hard to get right. But if you're in VR to begin with, using a tool like EditorXR, it's very natural because you have yourself there for scale. So it can be really faster and more efficient this way. So this tool gives access to most all of the existing 2D menus in Unity. And going beyond that, it offers new kinds of user interfaces, like the mini worlds seen right here. Now this is a brand new user experience they invented for the VR experience, which would have no kind of bearing in a flat screen tool. So I'm really excited about these. I feel like this is a large area of potential as we develop specialized tools for a particular medium that I see people nodding, so obviously there's been similar experiences. I think this is where we can start to get to a much more natural experience of creation of content that doesn't take a whole bunch of training. Like when we're working on a flat screen, the 3D has been projected down one dimension, and you need all these abstractions like menus and mouse and keyboard and weird things that aren't very natural. But when you're in VR, you have your hands in your head and you're right there. So it's very natural. When these UX are done right, I feel there's amazing potential to open it up to more content creators. So these kinds of VR-based tools can be very helpful for film production as well. Even if you're not making a VR experience, if you're making something like a film that'll be rendered and showed on a screen in the end, just being in the VR to create your content can be super powerful. So virtual production is one of the really common things right now that's used for pre-visualization. I got to try it out myself earlier this year. I presented a course at SIGGRAPH about authoring real-time motion capture. And this is a quick experiment we made using the SmartSuit Pro, personal mocap suit by Rokako. So we built a hybrid system for tracking world space position using the Vive. You can see he's wearing a Vive tracker on his back. And the virtual camera is similar, like just a tablet with second monitor and a Vive tracker. So simple setup. And as soon as we got this up and running, it was just so exciting. Like we just felt like kids again. I want to browse the asset store and get whatever characters and environment and tell a story. So I feel like virtual production is not only faster and more efficient, it's a whole new creative process because it's so much more direct. You can make so many more iterations so quickly. So this is just a quick test, but I feel there's major potential there if people were to spend a bit more time than just a weekend like we did. So one of the big examples of this is recently reported how Steven Spielberg used VR-based tools to direct Ready Player One. He was able to get inside the headset, be inside his movie set before it was constructed, move things around to his liking, and compose camera shots very naturally as if he was there, and really save massive amounts of money if it were to be constructed, and get his creative vision that much closer to how he wants it. So that's very exciting. It feels like virtual production is really taking off as the new standard way of film production. So there's some great tools we have here in Unity, and we're happy to announce that the people who built the tools used by Spielberg there, a company called Digital Monarch Media, was recently acquired by Unity, so that we can bring these virtual production tools to all of our developers. So it's super exciting to me because this is once the domain of only the professional, high-end Steven Spielbergs of the world and big studios. And now it can be fully democratized and accessible to everyone. These tools by Digital Monarch Media are actually for professional film productions. So they're still pretty high-end, but they will be available for everyone. And at Unity, we like to try and support all of the range of creators, from the super high-end to the individuals. Maybe people who just have a good idea, and they haven't been devoting their whole life to learning the art of animation. But if their story can be told, I'm super excited to hear those stories. And so as a project of my own, I built an educational VR experience, working on a master's in education at Drexel University. And one of the things I was really excited about here is allowing these storytelling tools to go to people who wouldn't otherwise have a voice in this new media. And, for example, folklore, to let people tell their authentic stories this way, in this really powerful new media. So the first experiment was a project called Lotus and the Dragon here. I'll just play a little video. This is a very quick prototype I made in a couple of weeks as a school project. And this is a Find the Hidden Object game. And it's based on the classic 17th century folklore called Princess Lotus. So VR in education presents so much opportunity too, because the experience of being in VR creates real memories as if you were there. So this is so much more direct than learning in the abstract. And for many people, I think it could empower them to get the education they need. And yeah, being in VR, it's really tempting to just throw things. And in this game, everything ends up in the lake in the end. It's really fun. So yeah, just if people have read the story, they can go into the VR experience and explore it, pick things up, interact with them. And if they've understood the story, they will know how to progress through the game. So it serves as a form of reading comprehension as well. So I'm very interested in this potential of education through VR and XR. So if people are also interested, please come and talk to me. We're looking for how to get this out there more, and also to help these people tell the stories from whatever background they come from across the world. Personally, I feel like this is something we need in this day and age, to understand and appreciate people of different cultures and overcome our fear of the unknown. And I think that VR really gives that potential. So thank you very much. That's what we have. Do you have time for questions?
Again, we have time for questions. Hands up. Anyone? We have 5 minutes.
Laura, I'm lonely.
Hello.
Up here.
There we go. I just want to comment because I'm so happy to see the work, but I also am really excited about the area that you're going into, educational, cultural learning. I had a discussion yesterday about all the gaming and the war game and the sort of military forward type of things through PlayStation and such, but there are so many other worlds to look at and to use the technology for, and I think people are hungry for it. So I hope that I'm confident that it's going to
Yay.
push through all that. Thank you.
And thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. You showed basically 3 different tools: Project Mars, and then the virtual production, and the
Editor XR.
Yeah. And there were URLs. Are all of the projects now available for developers, and what state are they in?
So Editor XR is available. That's fully released, and there's a GitHub link right there. If anyone wants it, come talk to me afterwards. Project Mars is in alpha right now. There's select partners that they're working with in alpha. come talk to me if you're interested, and we'll see what we can do. But it's also right around the corner. And the tools by Digital Monarch Media for virtual production, the acquisition was just announced like less than a month ago. So I think there's still some time to prepare those and understand the roadmap for how and when they'll be released. But I'm sure it'll be well published on the Unity blog, so stay in touch. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There's someone else at the back.
Thanks for the talk. This talk was heavily focusing the VR side of Unity. I'm working more on the MR development using the HoloLens, and this is heavily relying on object detection. And there is some plugins that you can get for a lot of money. Is there plans to, like Vuforia and stuff, is there plans to include something down the road in the Unity package? Is there plans to make those tools accessible to the developers, because I think they are essential for AR and MR development?
Yes, good question. Absolutely. So object detection is super important, and the more we can know about the world we're seeing in our AR, the more we can do good things with it. So I think it's often what's called semantic recognition. When I see a can of soda on the table, I know what brand it is. I can offer you to buy a copy or something. Those many things you could do with it. So Project Mars is one of the efforts that's diving deep into that area. And what we're trying to do is provide access to whatever your platform supports and whatever your APIs that you're publishing to support. So the Project Mars will let you use it if it's there and design a fallback plan if it's not. So that's one of the difficult things about producing for ARs. You often have a wide variety of devices. They may have different capabilities. So that's why Mars is a one-stop shop where you can publish to all and make the best use of all. So semantic recognition is one of them, and I think that when there are standards emerge, we support them. And when great tools are out there, we integrate them or build a version of our own. So specifically speaking on that point, I'm not the one who knows for sure. And if you want to follow up with me, I can help direct your question to our team in San Francisco. Actually does most of the XR development. Out here in Copenhagen, we have just a few people, but happy to follow up with you if you'd like.
Thank you very much. I like the presentation. I wanted to ask about the animation in Unity. Right now it's like this, that you have to rig every object you want to animate, and that's really a pain in the ass for some things you want to do. For example, if you have Maya, you can do also keyframe animation of some abstract objects with vertices. Why is it not possible to export or import this keyframe animation? It would be so much easier than for each object to create a new rig.
Well, you're speaking my language. My specialization in the past was rigging, and that's what I did leading the rigging department at Bungie. So I can absolutely identify that this is a pain in the whatever body part you want to say. It is. It's a shame that it causes need to have a specialist hired for this, and the specialists devote their whole time to it. Like I started out wanting to be an animator, and I realized you need rigging to do that. And like, oh, it turns out I'm good at this, and I kind of like it. Yeah. But what about this goal of making animation? So I think I'm directly involved with some efforts to make that more available in Unity. And one by one, we're tackling the obstacles in rigging and democratizing them. And my goal is to make the job go away so that this is not thought of as rigging anymore, that is thought of as animation. And these tools should be easy enough to use that an artistic person could jump in there and use them. And I'll be happy to find another job when that day comes.
Yeah, you don't have to kill all the riggers. I don't say
oh no, they're great people. They'll find other problems to solve.
Yeah. I just mean it would be easier and also more efficient if you. It's not. You still need the rigs for characters, but if you have abstract objects, it's stupid. You don't need rigs for an abstract object. I used blend shapes, but there is just two options. You can blend between two shapes, and that's really limiting. And
I have one more option for you.
Oh.
And this also speaks to the earlier question about visual effects. There's a new tool, really awesome tool called Visual Effects Graph which was released.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to make the professional visual effects artists very happy and probably don't need to go to plugins outside of Unity. The VFX graph is the real deal. Like, we have a lot of AAA artists working with us now who know what's needed in high-end production. So this tool supports that. And one of the things, so that was visual effects graph, that works. And shader graph, similar tool, you can do vertex animation. So there's another way of making your models move around without rigging. And so if you want to make it like underwater seaweed waving, very easy with vertex animation. Yay. So
Someone happy.
follow up with me if you want links to this afterwards. You made my day, thanks.
I think you made her day too.
Oh.
Yeah.
It worked out.